Hey TC, we're back here today, and we're going to start us off again here with headlines. And the big one
You're
here,
why do we why do we start off with the most painful part of the
we,
night?
we got to grin and bear it, or at least you do. So this one comes
Pain
from
is weakness leaving the body.
true. So this one comes from Task and Purpose, and it's the mil. I wish I could find a joke for this one, but it's so sad and depressing because it's true that I just couldn't make a joke up for it, and I think they did a good job. The military keeps finding it did nothing wrong when it investigates itself. In this case, it's in war things inevitably go wrong, but people die as a result. Events in Kabul, Syria, and Niger and elsewhere have shown the military has a tendency to use its investigations to absolve itself rather than to hold senior leaders accountable for their mistakes. So a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about here, that we talked with General Bolduc about and stuff like that, and yeah, we looked at ourselves and we're doing just fine.
I Are you sure? Like, where did that come from? Because that sounds like an Onion or a Babylon B level.
That's from Task and Purpose, but the story is real. They did investigate themselves very recently in Syria because it just came to light that they bombed innocent civilians and women and children, and yeah, it wasn't their fault.
I, that literally, it's like straight out of the Babylon B.
You know, you would think that at some point they would maybe find something wrong with themselves, but no, they have not.
That had to
Um,
be satire. There's no way that's.
so, how is your food at your home? Does it feel secure?
Wait a minute. Are we doing a in video ad?
No, no. What we are doing right now is we're reading this story where thousands of military families struggle with food insecurity. Now, when my food is
Mm.
insecure, I like to build its confidence up by telling it what a good job it does.
And clearly, if Skipper stands up, you can see how good of a job his food does. No, I've heard that term before, and I guess we used to just call it, I hate to say it, but we used to just call it being poor.
Yep.
And the problem is, and I've seen this over the last couple of weeks, I have some like legit friends who now have been sending pictures out of store shelves, like Targets and Walmarts and other places where the food section is just completely wiped out. So it's no longer just an issue of poverty, but this has been going on with the military for a long time, for a
Yes, it
very
has.
long time. I have not been in the military for a very long time. Like almost as long as I've been out of high school. And I'll tell you there stories of military families learning how to like make the most out of ramen noodles and ketchup. And so it's sad that we're at that still at that place where that's happening. And it says a lot about how we treat our military, not just in general, but just across the board, veterans and whatnot. So it's I don't know.
Yeah. Here in the
It,
story, it says that 160,000 active duty military members are having trouble feeding their families. And that estimate is by Feeding America, which coordinates the work of more than 200 food banks across the country. Uh, the most activists say it's existed for years and primarily affects junior level enlisted members, ranks E1 to E4 in military parlance with children. So I know for a fact that an E4 with two kids qualifies for WIC. So that's how bad of a job the military does. And then you throw in the current inflation that we have, and that food dollar is not going to go very far.
how how serious you want me to take this section of the night?
As serious as you want to take it.
This is why, quite frankly, this is why we were never meant to have. Okay, I know this is Veteran Nation, and that the majority of our viewers are veterans, but this is why we were never intended to have a full-time standing army or standing military. We just
You're
it,
absolutely
it
right. It
there's
was very big time debate in the early America.
Yeah, there's our founding fathers never intended for us to have what we have for the military industrial complex that we do today. And that's not to take away from the men and the women in the military. Can I say men and women? I mean, is that like the gender non-specific individuals, whether they be menstruating people or not? There's your levity, folks. It's just you cannot have a standing military that's as broad and as wide and it has a depth that it does and is supposed to be trained at the levels that it's supposed to be trained at and deployed the way it's supposed to be deployed, and expect that you could pay them the way they're supposed to be paid to take care of a family, because at some point they're going to want to have a family. The men and women are going to want to have a family. And you just cannot reasonably expect to pay them what you pay them and expect them to take care of a family. Period. You can't.
Yep, absolutely. And it's only getting worse, and it's going to be a problem for years and years to come, unless they decide to address it in Congress.
And think about where most of the military posts are, whether you want to say base or fort or whatever, or port or naval base or air base. Think about where most of them are. They're not in the easy to live in parts of the country when it comes to the Midwest, and the cost of living in the Midwest being what it is compared to the East Coast and the West Coast. Most of them are in on the coast. They're in areas
very
that
expensive
are
cities.
very expensive. And so most of our military, even our enlisted officers, or not enlisted officers, but commissioned officers, live at a poverty level until you start to get up to the general officer level.
Yeah, even for military officers, if you didn't go through ROTC or go to one of the service academies, you're probably going to have student loans that are going to be a significant portion of your pay for several years. And there's no programs that they have to help pay that down. I'm going to shift a little bit with this next headline. Do you like dogs?
Do I like that? You know I like dogs.
Well, you're going to hate this story. A potato the size of a small dog was found in New Zealand. Colin and Donna Craig Brown were weeding their garden in New Zealand when Colin's hoe struck something huge beneath the soil surface. I don't know why they just wouldn't say Donna struck something huge beneath the soil surface. As the couple knelt down and began digging around the object, Colin wondered if it was some kind of strange fungal growth, a giant puffball. After Colin pried it out with his garden fork, he scratched away a skin and tasted it. Why you're eating things out of the ground, Colin, I have no clue. But it turns out it was just a potato. It weighed in at a remarkable 7.9 kilograms. The story comes out of New Zealand, so that's actually 17.4 pounds. And that's equal to to a couple of sacks of regular potatoes or one small dog.
That's not 17 pounds is not a small dog. I mean, it's a small dog compared to mine, but that's still bigger than your dog.
Actually, Glory is 17 pounds on the dot.
Not that I don't respect your dog for doing what it does by serving you, but...
Well, I knew I would throw you a loop for that one, and that was all to set up this final headline. Are you familiar with Fort Irwin? Out here, not too far from me, out here in the desert.
Well, I know of it. Familiarity is a different story.
Well, let me ask you this. When you were in the Army, how many times were you attacked by a ninja?
Are we talking about like the food choppers or...
No, an actual ninja, like a guy dressed in black with a sword.
I can honestly say that never happened to me while I was in the military.
Well, special operations soldiers were put under lock and key for a very short time at Fort Irwin because a man decked out in ninja gear and toting a sword assaulted 2 soldiers at an airfield in the Mojave Desert last month, leaving them wounded and hunkered down in a locked building late at night, according to reported leaked military report.
Stop. Go back to that. Soldiers, special, what did you say? Special operations?
Yes.
So we put our special ops guys under lockdown
because there was a ninja on the base. They
because
were
a guy dressed like a
apparently
ninja.
our GI Joes were taking on Storm Shadow. I know there's a lot to take in with this story, but it's an actual true story.
Straight out of the Onion.
No, this is actually well, I found it on a couple sites, but what I'm reading from right now is the Daily Beast. U.S. Army Special Operations Aviation Command spokesman Major Jeff Slinker confirmed to Stars and Stripes that an incident detailed that the leaked document floating around Reddit on Wednesday had occurred, but did not offer further comment. Kern County deputies confirmed Friday they had arrested a suspect, 35-year-old Gino Rivera, who they said assaulted a victim at the scene with a sword and threw a rock through a hangar window, hitting a second victim in the head. They had that Rivera brandished the sword at deputies. Rivera was booked into the central receiving facility for attempted homicide and a slew of weapons-related and other charges.
So, well, and this is a preemptive condolences to the family, but he probably had the death touch. So those security officers that he attacked probably don't have long left.
So this actually reminds me of a case that we had when I was in Afghanistan. There was an Army soldier who had gone missing initially, but then they found him outside the wire. He had dressed all in black. He had his ice axe and a couple ninja swords, and he apparently he left the base thinking that he was going to find his way out of Afghanistan and into, I guess, Central Asia somewhere. But that story made its rounds. It reminded me of this when I was reading it, and I had to laugh because have you ever watched the movie American Ninja?
Yes.
This is just like that movie. It's like that movie is turned into a documentary.
No.
I've never served in the Army, but I have watched American Ninja. Now, after reading this story, I think I kind of have an idea of what it's like. And just like how, I was never in the Navy, but I did see the movie Battleship. I got it.
Do you guys see what I put up with?
But that's it for headlines. I do want to get into a big story, a serious story. This one comes from military.com. The Pentagon is failing to screen most transitional troops for suicide risk, Watchdog says. The Pentagon screened only about 1/3 and 20%, 34% in 2020 and 30% in 2019 of all transitioning troops who face risk of suicide. That's 3 times higher than active duty service members, the IG reported. They were supposed to screen 100% by the end of 2018 in a joint plan with the VA. So, as we've said on here many times, the military, the VA, they're absolutely failing our soldiers and servicemen. And this is just proof of that.
I have mixed feelings on this. One, I don't want the military screening people because on one level, when they're screening people, it's gonna probably end up haunting that person for the rest of their life. They're gonna get out, and if they do have a high risk of a suicidal ideation or PTSD, they're probably never going to be able to get a firearm in their lives, no matter how well adjusted they are. And because that goes down on your, permanent record. And and that affects you through red flag laws and the background checks and stuff. And the people that you want owning firearms are the people that know how to use them.
Hmm.
And that'll be a segue for me here for what
Go
I
right
want to
ahead.
talk about coming up. But I also struggle with this idea that they're like, what did you say their original target was? How many percent of what was the percentage of people that
They were supposed to start getting 100% of all of them screened by 2018. And in 2019, they only got 30%. Last year, they only got 34%.
it, there again, mixed feelings. I'm glad they're not getting everyone, because especially considering the direction that the military is going, and you know, we have generals and in other high ranking general officers out there right now that are, you know, saying that the two things that we need to be combating the most with the military is global warming and implementing critical theory. And so we've also watched active duty and guards and reserve members be drummed out for being Trump supporters.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a reality in which your mental health could be used against you because they can just label you mentally ill through PTSD or something else. But at the same time, instead of getting these people help, they're just throwing them to the wolves, so to speak. And
Well,
now they're on the.
as
Go
we
ahead.
saw with Lieutenant Colonel Scheller, they had absolutely zero qualms about saying, "Oh, this guy's already sought mental health treatment." Out of his medical record, without his permission, they were releasing stuff like that, all because they didn't like his videos.
Well, and gee, like I've never experienced anything like that
Oh yeah, but I mean, yeah, it's just
ever.
the I compare it to the jab right now. They are working to get 100%, but yet we've only lost, I believe, all told, the last 2 years, 34 service members to the virus. But that there's a big rush to get everybody the jab. However, suicides have been high for years. Like, we're going on 2 decades now, and they still haven't really pushed any real solution.
This is the longest war in the history of the United States,
Mm,
outside of the drug war, which has been fought by the military, by the way. Um,
absolutely.
it, and I am not a libertarian or an anarchist, or in the way most people look at it. But I mean, look at we're destroying the lives of men and women
Mm.
who are boy, they're gonna kick me off the network.
Just keep it
They're
clean.
just when you know that normally won't be an issue for me. Um, we're destroying the lives of people who maybe enlist or join through ROTC, who or go green to gold or whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
who who really believe they're serving their nation. They really believe that.
Yeah.
And we send them off to fight foreign wars that are not doing anything for the United States. And it's not protecting us. It's not keeping us safe. We pay them like dog crap. We treat them worse than dog crap. And then we separate them from the military when the time comes. And even those that are staying long enough to retire, their pension is crap.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then we say to them, now go fight for your benefits.
Yeah.
Go, and our president offers $450,000 per person to people who were separated at the border for the
Because
trauma
they
and the
were
damage that.
they were taken away from their families, but yet we take our military members away from their families all the time, for years sometimes.
Right. And so this is why, quite frankly, this is why I've become an isolationist.
Mm-hmm. No, I
it's not because I don't respect
it.
the people that go. I'm sorry, Skipper, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I totally understand it. It's a natural progression of thought.
And it's just we've gotten to a place where we have got to ask ourselves why. Like, I'm starting to find myself agreeing with Neil Young in his music from the 60s and 70s. I never thought that would happen. But it's true. I'm no senator's son, and most of the people in the military aren't. They're,
Yeah.
Here,
there's only 16% of Congress are military veterans right now, but yet you compare that to past when we had 29 presidents who were military veterans.
Right. Well, let's see. Let's think about that. So let's just go with that for just a second. Let's go through and go back. The last military veteran that we had as president was
Bush.
Bush 1.
Yep. No, but W.
Yeah, right. So we had W, and then W1,
mm-hmm.
W2, W1, and then
the
you
last
go
7,
back.
only 2 have been veterans.
Yeah. And so I think you go back far enough. It was JFK. It was JFK and then Eisenhower, wasn't? Am I correct?
Carter was. I don't believe. Well, I know Nixon wasn't, and I know LBJ wasn't. So yeah,
right.
JFK, Carter, Bush 1, Bush 2.
And if you're crazy enough to think that this is just a Republican versus Democrat issue, you're nuts, because the Republicans will throw your kids under the bus for the sake of war hawking just as much as the Democrats will, and actually maybe not as much as the Democrats will, because I've never seen a group of people that are more war hawking, honestly, than the Democrats. They will wag the dog. You're right there. You're right there, Skipper. Is that a hint? Yep. Am I going too far?
No, I drank my water.
The irony is a Marine drowning on camera from drinking water.
But yeah, that's
we are a professional show, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, you really hope that Congress and the president would really give a lot of serious thought before we put our troops in any type of harm's way. But especially when it comes to like our aircraft, they don't think 2 seconds about it. They're willing to put them, up in the air over hostile territories.
Well, it's just because we're so cocky and arrogant as to believe that no one can touch us.
Yeah.
Anymore. You go back to the Bosnian conflict, and we had that Air Force pilot that was shot down there, and they did a movie about it, and they just absolutely were convinced that there was no way that an American aircraft was going to be shot down by the military in Kosovo, in that area, and yet here, how many millions and millions of dollars did we lose in that? And then how many millions did we invest to rescue him? And rightly so. You don't want to leave a pilot or anybody else behind.
Well, and even you go back to Mogadishu, Somalia, with the Black Hawk Down situation. They were so convinced that the air superiority was going to be that big of an advantage that they didn't have proper QRF. QRF ready to go in case they ran into any type of situation. And, then we had a Black Hawk go down. And from there, it just spiraled out of control.
That situation got me in trouble, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I was at Fort Bragg when that happened, and we knew about it obviously before the media and the public did, because that was a Delta team that was flying with SOAR, Special Operations Aviation Regiment, out of Fort Campbell. But that was a Delta team and Rangers and whatnot, and so the local media really was really honing in, and you know, and at the risk of exposing myself for being who I am and what I am, which is brazen at times, I was on my way to lunch with a really good friend of mine at the time, and we're still in contact sporadically. But we were on our way to lunch at the Taco Bell just off of the off post. I think it was that was one in Hope Mills, just off of Fort Bragg, and excuse me, and there was a camera crew for a local news station. I don't remember which affiliate. I don't NBC, CBS, whatever, trying to get people to talk, and they were just getting in everybody's faces, and it was, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And Skipper, do I need to call 911 or?
No, you're good. I'm just trying to get it out.
And what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And everybody was just trying to get to lunch. And I got up there and they're like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, you really want to know what I think? Because I'm just trying to get to lunch. If you want to keep shoving that microphone and that camera in my face. And they got right, real close to me. And I says, here's the deal. President Clinton and his administration are murderers. They are murderers because they asked us, the military commanders on the ground asked for armored support, not just air support. They asked for armored support, and they were told no because the rules of engagement would not allow for something that powerful to show up because the optics would be bad. And I said, so yeah, you want to know what I think? President Clinton murdered those men by being more worried about what the UN and the world would say than doing what they asked for, instead of trusting his military commanders. And I got my rear end chewed out the next day by people in command. And then I also got told that I was absolutely right after I was told I wasn't allowed to say anything like that again. And so this will shock people to find out that me standing up for what I believe is not new.
Not a new trait.
I might have become a little bit more nuanced in my maturity, but not a new trait. So,
well, stand up for what you believe is right, and many times you'll probably find out that you will be right. Because as long as you're doing something from principle, because even if you're wrong, you can say, well, I stuck true to my principles. But I do want to segue a little bit, because we were talking about, weapons, and I know the big news is the Rittenhouse trial.
Yeah, it sure is. Maybe more so for those of us here in the upper Midwest than maybe in other places, but I don't understand how people can't be paying attention to this, because this is American, not just culture, but this is American constitutional republic kind of stuff on trial here. And
have you been following the trial?
Oh yeah. In as much as I can. I mean, I'm trying to work again, so I have to be.
What's your assessment?
If the jury is allowed to be a jury in this situation, the jury is going to find him completely not guilty. It's going to be a complete acquittal across the board. The prosecution has proved it was self-defense.
I do not think that the prosecution has proved its case beyond a reasonable doubt. I think
Though they've proved the defense's case.
yeah. The several people on the stand and several things that they were trying to push, I think absolutely backfired on them. I really, they. I don't think they should have brought this case to trial. I think what they should have done was be willing to accept, plea agreements, try to get them to plead to something lesser. But yeah, it just imploded, I believe, in their faces. Right now, their whole case hinges on a picture where he supposedly picked up his gun, pointed at Rosenbaum, and that was supposed to be provoking.
Are you talking about the FBI drone surveillance?
Yes, and the defense.
Just stop there for a second, Skipper. I want this to sink in, people. The FBI was surveilling Kenosha as it burned.
Yep.
As it burned. This was not a peaceful protest. This was not a bunch of outraged minority members of the community who were burning down the neighborhood because their voices weren't being heard. And as the extremist leftists have said, Molotov cocktails and firebombs are the only way the unheard can have a voice. That was not the case. That was not what was happening here.
That's when it comes to the charges, I think as far as him shooting Huber and Grosskurtz, I think that is totally done. I don't see where they can convict him on any of those charges because I don't think it meets the elements of murder without self-defense. I think the only charge that they could possibly ever debate is Rosenbaum, but I think there's more than enough things in there to doubt the prosecution's case.
Yeah, no, the Rosenbaum was a clean shoot. Was actually, if you ask me, outside of Grosskurtz, Rosenbaum was the cleanest shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he definitely fled, even though in Wisconsin,
because he communicated a threat to Rittenhouse, to Kyle and the others well before this, and then he chased him, and Kyle actually did everything he could in his power to flee. Contrary,
they only have the only thing about Rosenbaum is that they're contending that he pointed his weapon, and the thing is, the video footage of it is not clear at all.
Not clear.
There's no one that they produced in testimony who said, "Oh yeah, he was threatening them." So, and your victim Rosenbaum didn't survive. There's no way are they going to put Zemensky up on the stand because
Zeminski's already said he never pointed his weapon at us.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think they met the standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think he's going to walk. One thing I want people to realize, here's what's going to happen if and when he's acquitted. If you thought there were a lot of people outside protecting their property with guns in May, you just wait, because now so many gun owners are going to be more emboldened to protect their property. And Wisconsin is a castle doctrine state. So if it's your property, your home, your business, you can absolutely protect it. It's not a stand your ground state. So if you leave your property and someone attacks you, you have a duty to flee, which Rittenhouse did.
Except the judge in this situation flat out told the jury and admonished the prosecution that Kyle didn't have a duty to flee in that situation.
Yeah.
So this is a precedent, and I hate that term precedence because there's no such thing as precedence in law. Either it's law or it's not. But we've bought into the lie that there is precedence. Either common law says there is or isn't a factual establishment of what you can and cannot do. But the judge has flat out said Kyle didn't have a duty to flee. And so it really, in that case, what Castle Doctrine he did is with that Castle Doctrine, he's established castle doctrine being wherever you are in the moment is your place to be. There's no other way to look at it. And so before I move on directly to the judge in this situation,
Mhm.
the judge dismissed the charge of unlawful possession of a firearm by a minor.
Yep.
When it came to Kyle.
And that's very, very well sounded thing. As the judge stated earlier in the week, he said, when it comes to penal code, it's not the reasonable person standard, of, well, what would a reasonable person think? When it comes to penal code, it's interpreted strictly. And, there's been several legal people who weighed in and said, well, the laws are written badly. Yeah, the laws written badly will always favor the defendant because, again, you have to interpret the statute strictly. And yeah, they put this this condition in there that about, if you're under the age of 18, but I believe it's above the age of 16.
16 to 17.
Oh, okay, yeah, 16 to 17. Carrying a long rifle is absolutely allowed, and that's between a barrel length of 16 inches and 26 inches. And if I remember correctly, Kyle's barrel length was 18 inches, so it met that standard. It had no clause in there for hunting, but a lot of people use that part of the statute.
And I would actually disagree that the law was written poorly. People want us to be so pedantic in how laws are written, and quite frankly, I can understand why to some degree, but they want us to be so pedantic in how a law is written that it's got to spell out every single potentiality of what could possibly happen under this law. That we don't have enough, like murder is not murder. I mean, we don't.
I think where they're coming from, the aspect of it's not written well, is because there's another section of the law that says someone under the age of 18 cannot hold a dangerous weapon, and firearm is given in there, but it's not fully defined. So according to the other statute, when you put it in together, handgun completely out, but yet long rifle is okay. And there's going to be a lot of confusion for people.
Don't you think that the reason that the handgun is out and the long rifle is in is because a handgun in this situation could be more easily concealed and used?
Absolutely.
This is the closest we've come to arguing people, so you should really cut this section out and use it as a highlight reel. It's just the prosecution. Look, I put a video out on my personal Facebook page on Sunday where I said, look, I am a law and order guy, and I always have been. The problem is my idea of law and order was you have to err on the side of the cops and you have to err on the side of the justice system in general. And you back the prosecution and you back the judges and you back the prison industrial complex. And over the last 13 years in my now former career, I came to a realization, almost kicking, drug to that realization, kicking and screaming, that actually the prosecution is corrupt. Prosecution is corrupt, and they will say and do anything they can to get that notch in their belt to have a conviction. And really what the prosecution should be doing is trying the cases fairly. And instead of making up arguments and positing those arguments as if they're somehow law, somehow they're statute, they should be operating on what the evidence shows and not what their personal interpretation is. And what I'm going to tell people, if you are a conservative or a libertarian or whatever, and you happen to be watching this, if you are law and order for you should mean you back the defense regardless, because the defense in anything short of a clear-cut case of this, okay, yeah, this guy was literally caught raping and murdering children, like in the act. We should be comfortable with the idea of 1,000 guilty people going free more than one innocent person being unjustly convicted.
Absolutely.
And what we have done in the United States is we have lumped being pro law and order in with being back the blue at all costs and back the prosecution at all costs, and truly constitutionally minded, republic loving American citizens should be on the side of the defense every time. Every time. Every time.
Yeah,
Because
we
that's
should expect the prosecutor to have to build a very tight case.
Mhm.
You know, the wishes and wants type of things. No, that should not be entered into a court of law. It should absolutely be a trial of facts. And I think
Great.
that
The
that's
defense
what's
should basically be able to walk in, sit down, and say, I don't have anything to say until you start talking.
yeah.
And you look at how the judges had to admonish the prosecution in this case over and over
Dude,
and over and over and over and over and over.
they were trying to say that his silence was like some type of admission of guilt. That has been struck down so many times in the courts that for the last 50 years it's been established precedent since Miranda that you have the right to remain silent. You don't have to talk at all because it can be used against you. You don't have to self-incriminate. And this prosecutor was trying to say that, well, he hasn't talked, so what does that say? And it's like, no, you can't do that. And the judge yelled at him, correctly so, for it.
Literally yelled at him. And that brings me to segue. That brings me to what they've done now to this judge. And they've not been able to come up with anything tangible with this judge. So now they're taking his comment about, I sure hope that the Asian food isn't coming on one of those boats from California because it won't get here on time, and have now turned that into some sort of woke offense
It
against
is,
the
yeah, it's
community.
ridiculous.
And,
It's just
like,
that, and his ringtone had Trump's campaign song. You want to know what? That was my grandfather's favorite song, and he died in 1997. So,
what, I don't even know what I did. What's the song?
he has had "God Bless the USA" as his ringtone for his phone. It went off in court the one day, and he picked it up and turned it off, and they were like, "See," and then he wore a tie with flags on it, and that was a dog whistle. It's like, yeah, you guys are clearly grasping at straws. Clearly grasping.
I mean, heaven forbid that a judge be pro-republic. I mean, pro-America. Heaven forbid that he takes an oath that he swears to defend the Constitution of the United States from enemies, both foreign and domestic, like any other person in the military or in law enforcement or any other public servant, by the way, in the public sector, by the way. And he wears a flag tie or has a "God Bless the USA," like, because somehow he's not allowed to have any view. And then he says and makes a joke, which I think, I'm sorry, was hilarious.
If you went to a Lee Greenwood concert, okay, and you were to snap a photo of the crowd, he fits into the demographic of 95% of that crowd. He's an old white man. He obviously, I'm going to guess at what he makes, and I'm going to say he probably meets a certain income level. He fits right for that demographic. It has nothing to do with Trump. In fact, I thought that Trump choosing that song, I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of like an old person song. When he chose it, I was like, okay, well, that's what he's gonna do. That's what he's gonna do. But for me, it didn't feel like it was gonna open up. There weren't gonna be any young voters coming to Trump because of his choice of song. You know what I mean?
Well, but I just want to come back to the reality of the thing that they think that they've been able to cling on to now is he made a joke about Asian food coming from California, and it had nothing to do with Asians, and it had nothing to do with people coming from the far east. It had everything to do with a statement about the California political system that has the ships blocked out of the harbor because they're not allowed to unload, and when they can unload, they've got to wait for the properly qualified trucks to be there
it's a
to
joke about
unload them.
stupid delays. That's what the joke is about.
That's
It's
all
not a
it
joke
was.
about
And
Asians.
you have got to be such a panty waist milk toast wimp to see that as anything other than what it was. And what we've seen now is, oh, he's disqualified from being a judge because he hates Asians and he's a racist. What? That's literally racist to say that. Like it's literally the epitome of what it means to be racist, to read that into that. And that's how freaking far we've fallen.
You know, it reminds me of Jerry Seinfeld's favorite joke, which, you know, on its face, people would be like, oh, that's a racial joke, but it really isn't. And the joke is one Gentile says to the other one, hey, how you doing? And the second Gentile says, not bad. It's not really a racial joke. It's just a stupid joke.
Just a stupid joke.
Yeah.
Which explains why you like it so much.
I like it because it's kind of an anti-joke. There's a punchline, but there really also isn't.
Which is like every one of your jokes.
But
who's your friend that's the comedian that couldn't be with us tonight?
Andrea Brandt. She did say she wants to come back on. We had her on the show a couple months ago. We will get you on, Andrea. We really do miss you because I know TC would much rather laugh at a real comedian than me.
Andrea, would you please write all of Skipper's jokes from now on?
I don't know. She's from New York, and those New York comedians can get a little bit edgy. Don't know if you're aware. They're the non-PC comedians, is the New York comedian.
I would take that over what you call comedy.
You know, that's where Andrew Dice Clay came from. I'm not going to do Andrew Dice Clay jokes. You can relax. The network can relax. But yeah. One last thing I did want to talk about this trial. Did you see the prosecutor pointing the AR-15 at the jury with his finger on the trigger today?
Well, you know, the scuttlebutt, and I think reliable scuttlebutt is that is it Binger? Binger actually ended up taking this case because the DA knew it was a dog.
Yep.
And Binger was kind of put in a position where he really didn't have much of a choice.
Well, he's also the nephew, I believe, of the mayor. So he's got family political connections there in the town. So when you get that, you get family members who are telling you, hey, here's what we want done with this case.
Yeah, I saw the pictures today, and I'm like, I've never seen anybody look so awkward holding a gun. It was like the kid. It was like the kid you knew who went to prom and had never had a date before, and he was dancing, and it was that stiff, formal, like one arm outstretched and the other arm on the, like, not around the back, but like on the waist. And the girl he was dancing with was trying to get him to like pull her in closer for an actual like close dance. And that's exact, like the gun was like, just caress me, please, just caress me. And he was like, no, I mustn't. And that's exactly
that visual
what
of him pointing the gun reminded me of that article about the I believe it was a New York Times journalist who said that he got PTSD from firing a AR-15 at the rifle range. I'm like, really? With a .223 round? That scared you? Oh, stay away from a M1 Garand, dude. That, you think you got PTSD now, you'll be waking up with nightmares.
Well, as you bring up the M1 Garand, right? We were getting ready to go, and I mentioned this before, Operation Restore Democracy to Haiti. Never happened, by the way. How do you restore democracy? Never. Okay. Anyway, side note, they were doing the threat briefing, and I think it might have been a butter bar lieutenant from Intel. It was coming in to do the threat briefing for our invasion of Haiti. And he said, well, they're firing, World War II and Korean era weapons. That's what they'll be firing at you. And I'm like, excuse me? Remember those little boxes you could buy with the kids? Please let me out of here. I'm over here like raising my hand. And I'm like, sir, with all due respect, are you aware of what the M1 Garand is?
30-06 round, right?
30-06 round, sir. I Specialist Pearson, I fail to see the relevancy of your comment. I'm like, sir, that's a 30-06 round. It goes in about yay big and comes out about like this. So if they shoot you in the leg, you're gonna die. And he didn't appreciate that.
I do love following the gun control people just to see what kind of BS they're gonna say, and it's always about AR-15s, never about like AKs or anything like that. But it's an exploding round, or it'll put a 5-inch hole through you, or what was the one that they just tweeted out that the defense talked about today? About someone said that you could shoot something like 30 rounds in 60 seconds, and it was like.
They did
What?
not. I did not see that.
Yeah, it was a tweet that someone, or 60, maybe 60 rounds in a second. It was like, huh? What? It's like,
so 1 round a second is considered dangerous?
well, when you're throwing these things out there and you really don't know what they mean, that's the thing.
That's literally the slowest rate of fire you could have. Bang, 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 bang. I would get bored. I was the guy that would go out to the range with the M60 and just put 1 round in at a time to sight my M60 in, just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I was the lieutenant who, when I went on a convoy, I told the lance corporal who was in the turret, I'm like, get out of the turret, I'm up there. He's like, sir? I'm like, no, get out of the turret, I'm up there. And I get up there and I push my helmet way down because the major was going vehicle to vehicle, checking everyone and watching as they went condition 1. And when he got to our vehicle, he checks everybody and he looks up to me and I go, pop my head up. I go, sir, I see we do the village, man. The whole effing village. And I'm racking it back. And he's like, Lance Corporal, get the lieutenant out of the turret. And he is not to be allowed back up there.
You probably shouldn't quote 1980s in movies in those situations.
Oh, he ended up riding in our Humvee. Well, it was not a Humvee, but it was a JTLV. He and ended up riding with us because he didn't trust me. And I was having a blast.
I have no idea why.
I was having a blast. But yeah, the few convoys I was allowed to do, that one was one. That was my first one, and it was my roommate was the convoy commander. He was a second lieutenant, so the major makes him do the convoy route and do everything, and he gives his brief to the major before we have to give it to the Marines. And he gives it, and I mean, he's very thorough. He was such a good lieutenant, very attention to detail. But the major found something to go off on him about, and he's, chewing him. Oh, you forgot this, and you didn't do this, and he's just, just wearing on a new one. And I'm the assistant convoy commander, so he looks at me and goes, all right, so what do you have to say? And I stand up and I look at the map. I'm like, sir, we're just going to the patrol base. It's like driving to Wisconsin. You zip in, you zip out. He lost it. It was like, is that Stripes? I'm like, yeah, that's the movie Stripes. He's like, oh my God, okay.
Hey, I want to point out something. I don't know if you can see it, but since you picked on me about books last time,
your many books.
My that's all one author, by the way.
Oh, I was going to ask if that was an encyclopedia, or as kids should know, that was our Google.
No, there's not even encyclopedias. It's a commentary by John Calvin. But I just since you made the smart aleck comment the last show, I don't know.
Well,
If
I wasn't
no,
trying to
that
be a smartass. Literally, when you look at people who are doing Zoom calls and stuff on networks, everybody does
the green
like,
screen of a
yeah.
bookshelf,
But
or a
when they do them
baseball field.
close, when you do them close and you can actually read the books, they're always virtue signaling with their books. It's like, well,
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, and it's like, how pompous can you be? And I just want to be like, you didn't read that.
Here's when everybody gets to look at my fat. Here's I should go in and find for all of our statist friends my John Calvin's commentary on Romans 13. where everybody today is statist, like, oh, you're supposed to obey the government because God said so in Romans 13. and Calvin has some very interesting things to say. And remember, he was writing to the King of France at the time. So
That's that's one thing I do like him, John Locke. I'm trying to think who else. I don't believe Voltaire wrote to or about.
Voltaire is not someone we should be quote.
But yeah, their writings. It was like, no, they were literally treason, and they could literally be put to death for what they were saying.
Well, it's funny that you said, because John Knox, the founder of the Presbyterian Church, had made a comment, and he wrote a book or a commentary called "The Monstrous Regiment of Women." It was like, could you imagine somebody trying to pull that off today?
Isn't that what we're getting with women now in
No,
front
don't,
roles?
Skipper. Theory is gonna come after you for that. Oh, we're coming up on our cap. So
Yeah, we're hitting our deadline. But anything else you want to talk about the trial?
I no, I just here's my closing thought, and this is, we have got to pay attention to this, because however this plays out, whether he's convicted, which referring to Kyle, or found not guilty or acquitted, this is going to dictate what our future looks like going forward as a republic, because all the evidence points to the fact that he's not guilty. He's not guilty. And so we have before us today the reality of, are we going to let a vocal mob of rioters who are culturally Marxist in their thought process dictate to us what we're going to do when it comes to justice, not social justice, not real true justice, but just justice. And keep in mind that in this very case, we've had this judge dismiss one juror for making an inappropriate joke about Jacob Blake, and we've also had this judge announce that there was attempted jury intimidation with video being shot of the jury being transported from their, I believe they're being sequestered. In this video of them being shot, were to the point where the deputies had to go and take the camera and make the person delete the video, and everybody, First Amendment. No, not that the First Amendment doesn't apply, but this is not a First Amendment issue. This is an issue of not having a jury be intimidated. And that's what's happening. And that's what they did with Derek Chauvin, with being threatened ahead of time. We're going to burn, and like elected representatives, elected servants saying, don't leave the streets until they hear your voice if he's not convicted. That's exactly what's happening here.
Mm.
This is a cultural revolution, and this is a linchpin in that moment for our republic. If Kyle Rittenhouse is found guilty, it will not be because the preponderance of the evidence proves he's guilty. Because the preponderance of the evidence is that Kyle Rittenhouse did nothing but defend himself from unjust attacks. Period. Period.
Yep.
End of story.
Yep.
Not because I'm on his side because he had a gun, but because it's just clear. It's just so clear. If he's found guilty, it will be nothing more than to appease the masses and try to prevent another burning. And what's going to happen is if he's not convicted, they'll burn, and if he is convicted, Kenosha and other cities will burn in celebration.
There's not enough evidence to show he provoked the attack, as the prosecution says. Just having a gun is not provoking an attack. If that was the case, then that means Gross Kurtz provoked the attack on himself.